Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Raw Life Health Show. I'm so excited to do another interview with somebody who's been eating a raw food diet for a very long time and helping people to have the best health. Tonight's guest is Loren Lockman. Say hello, Loren.
Hey, Paul, how you doing? Glad to be here with you.
I'm doing great, and thank you for taking the time to be here. And I know you're doing great. I see your links, and I know you're doing some great things that I want to discuss. But tell everybody, introduce yourself a little about who you are and what you do, and let everybody know.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Yeah, I can start, I think, by talking about the fact that, like a lot of people, I was a normal, healthy kid, but when I was in my early 20s, 23, I graduated from college a little bit late. It was about 6 months later, I found myself very sick, and I got worse with 3 years of medical care. Didn't know where else to turn. Ultimately realized that medicine didn't hold the answers for me. And so I started looking for my own answers. And I wound up adopting a raw vegan diet. I wound up coming across a book called Rational Fasting by Professor Arnold Ehret. I know you know the book. And I began water-only fasting. Now, back then, this is maybe funny for some of your listeners, but this is before we had internet, right? There was no Google, there was no any of this stuff. And so we're talking about 35 years ago. And at the time, I didn't know that there were places I could go to guide me through the process. So I fasted on my own. I worked my way up, and I wound up taking my health to an amazing new level, higher than I ever experienced before or thought that was even possible as a result of fasting. And by the time I learned that there were places you could go, I thought that they could do better, that I could do better. That places needed to be less clinical, more natural, that they were all run by people who were on the periphery of a raw vegan diet, which I had adopted at that point, but what weren't, not only weren't promoting a raw vegan diet, were telling people not to do that. And so I wanted to create something else. And so in November coming up, I'll celebrate my 31st year all raw, living on a fruit-based diet. And in March, this past March, just a few months ago, we celebrated our 26th anniversary with Tanglewood Wellness Center. In fact, you remember you came to speak at my very first location outside of Washington, D.C. That must have been 25 years ago.
Yes, I remember. And so when you say, so 32 years, you said all raw?
Coming up on 31.
31. Now you said fruit-based. So
yeah,
are you exclusively fruit, or is that just a majority of what you're doing?
No, I don't actually believe it's healthy to eat only fruit. Fruit's amazing, and I believe it is where we should be getting the bulk of our calories. It's all I eat much of the time. I eat once or twice a day, and it's not unusual for me to go a week without eating greens, but most weeks I eat leafy greens, soft, tender leafy greens like various lettuces, 2 or 3 times a week on average. I had some lettuce last night. It was the first time in a week. But aside from lettuce and fruit, that's about all I eat most of the time.
Okay. Well, there's so many questions I have for you. So first, your health. How has your health been over the years, the 31 years you've been on raw? Any issues, any challenges at all?
No, I have had 0 challenges. My health has been amazing. I went from being the sickest person I knew to being the healthiest person. In fact, I left this out of my very short bio, but at the time I went raw, I was just trying to get my health back. I was in the commercial real estate business in Washington, D.C., the youngest officer of the second largest company in the city. And I had no intention of leaving that field. It was a very lucrative field. I thought, I'll stay there until I retire. The change in me was so dramatic that people started coming up to me saying, "Oh my God, you look amazing. What did you do? Can you help me? Can you help my partner? Can you help my kid? Can you help my parent?" And I wanted to help people. I know you do too. That's why you've been doing what you've been doing for so long. And so I began coaching people, just helping people for free. But after a few years, I realized I was spending more time coaching people on their health than I was running the business that theoretically was supposed to pay the bills. And I decided that it felt much better to help people. So I became a full-time health coach and closed the real estate business. And I've been a health coach now for 30 years. That's all I've been doing. But yeah, it's been amazing. So I've got 6 siblings. They all wear glasses at least to read. My vision's still better than 20/20. I was a cadet at the U.S. Air Force Academy and had to, up in Colorado Springs, I had to wear big braces with metal hinges to ski. I love skiing, but I was up there in the Rockies, but I had, because of my knees, I had to wear these big braces. Today at 61, I surf and don't need braces. Same action. And here I am 43 years later. My body works better today than it did when I was 18.
Wow. So have you gotten any blood work done over the years, or do you not believe in that?
I don't actually believe in wasting my money. I gave up on health insurance a long time ago and haven't been sick a day, not a single day in 31 years. And I normally wouldn't do any of that kind of thing. But just over a year ago, I went to refinance my property here in Costa Rica. And painfully slow, everything down here in the tropics is crazy how slow things can take. When we got, after 2 years down the road, the bank says, okay, but we just realized that your place depends on you. If something happens to you, how are we going to get paid back? Your business will collapse. And I said, you're absolutely right. I had already thought of this and was hoping they wouldn't notice. But I wound up buying a life insurance policy. And in order to get the life insurance policy, I was required to do a full checkup, everything, blood, everything. And it was interesting because, I mean, they literally, they checked my sight, my vision, my reflexes, my blood, everything they could check. And the doctors who were performing these checks kept saying to me, "You're how old?" Because they couldn't believe that at the time I was 60 years old. It didn't make any sense. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you take or have you taken any supplements, or is it only food for you?
It's only food. I've taken no supplements whatsoever in just about 30 years. The very beginning, I took some supplements. I had this idea that maybe if I could get people on these raw supplements, it would open their mind to raw food. It didn't work that way. People said, "Oh, magic bullet. I don't need to eat raw food if I've got the supplement." And I thought, okay, I don't want anything to do with that. And I realized there are several things that are probably a little bit controversial. Okay, I know you've got an old buddy still up in I think he's in Brooklyn, and I heard the interview and talking about why it shouldn't be a fruit-based diet, but that's not been my experience. I mean, in fact, you're probably aware. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware of the glycemic index, but also of the glycemic load. And most fruits, while they have low to high. I mean, watermelon's got a high glycemic index. It's got a very low glycemic load. Almost all fresh fruits do. That's predictive of impact on blood sugar. So not only do I not have problems, I mean, I think one of the things, Paul, that makes me perhaps a little bit different than some of the folks is for 26 years now, I've run the world's largest dedicated water-only fasting center. And that's put me in the spotlight a little bit. I mean, positive and negative aspects to that, but it makes me more visible. And so I get a lot of coaching clients, even people that don't want to fast with me. I've now worked with more than 15,000 people personally in 30 years. And most of my clients, I mean, some people aren't even interested in going all raw, but that's what most people are attempting to do. And we see people with type 1 diabetes going onto a fruit-based diet and having their blood sugar go down every day. It's amazing what happens.
Type 1?
Type 1, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, type 2 is easy to eliminate. We've had 100% eliminating type 2 diabetes. But with type 1, the woman who produces my videos for the last nearly 5 years came to me as a client 6 years ago. Her blood sugar was 275, 250, 275 every day. She never had it checked at 28. And I said, "Have you ever had this test?" And she said, "No." I said, "Unfortunately, I think you might have type 1 diabetes." And sure enough, she went and checked later on and did. And she's been on insulin ever since. But she now uses a fraction as much insulin as she needed before, living on a fruit-based diet.
Wow. So when we talk about a fruit-based diet, is the majority of your diet, because you live in Costa Rica,
That's
are
right.
you going and getting it from your backyard off the trees, or are you getting it from your local supermarket, most of the fruit you're eating?
Well, the majority, so we're getting more and more from our property here. I've got 37 acres here. We've planted around 2,000 fruit trees. We've got more than 200 varieties planted on site. And many of those trees were planted within the last 5 years, and it takes most trees, 4, 5, 6 years to begin fruiting. So we harvest a lot here, but we're not harvesting everything yet. We still buy quite a bit. We don't buy anything from the local grocery stores. We have 3 or 4 different providers that provide us with all organic produce. And most of them, unfortunately, are coming in hours away from where their businesses are to deliver to us. So everything we serve, just as we did in the US. In the US, it was a little easier to get all organic, even 25 years ago. Today, when I got to Costa Rica, Central America, 17 years ago this month, it was really, really difficult to find much organic. It's gotten a bit easier. And we now have cultivated relationships with several providers that are willing to deliver to us. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully the goal is to be completely self-sufficient. And within, probably 3 or 4 years, we'll probably never be there, because we're always going to want avocados and watermelons, things we can't grow on site, but we can get from somewhere in Costa Rica all the time.
Sure. Now, do you see any issue at all with store-bought fruit?
Well, the biggest issue with store-bought fruit is that, there's a guy down in Hollywood. I can't think of his name right now, but I met him years ago, back when you and I used to speak at all the big raw vegan events in Portland and up in Buffalo, etc. And he was often, at least on the East Coast, he was often providing food for these venues. I got to know him there, and he told me years ago that on average, it was 6 weeks from the time something was picked, organic fruit was picked, until it wound up on the store shelf. And so that's a serious problem, because fruit is losing its vitality all the time. Obviously, it has to be picked too soon so it doesn't rot. As I'm sure you're aware, many fruits are non-climacteric, which means they stop ripening as soon as you pick them. I mean, some things will continue ripening, but some things won't. So a lot of people are eating a lot of things from stores that are never fully ripe. They can't be. Strawberries don't ripen once you pick them, but they don't pick them at the right time because they wouldn't get them to the market in time. So the biggest problem with store-bought fruit, even if it's organic, is it's going to be relatively low in vitality, and it's going to have far fewer nutrients than stuff that's picked, in the last few days. I mean, here, almost everything we eat was picked within the last 4 or 5 days.
Sure. Yeah, his name was Josh. I remember him, Josh.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's my one of the things I'm explaining to people. Even though I was able to stay in 100% raw vegan diet in New York City, eating pretty much 99% from a supermarket, now I have most of my food I can get fresh off my own property. But
yeah,
the average person can't do that. So the average person, when we're talking about raw vegan diet, fruit-based, the average person that lives in Seattle, Washington, an apartment, or New York City, they're not going to be able to. They're probably getting 100% fruit from the store that you and I know is low in nutrients, and it's not what it was really meant to be. So, with that being said, do you think still that a fruit-based or high fruit diet is still ideal based on the limiting factors of what people can get?
I do. Yeah, our clients so far have come from 147 of the world's 186 countries, and we have people living on a fruit. What I recommend is fruit and simple green salads, fruit and leafy greens, but again, soft, tender leafy greens like lettuces, and that's really all. I don't recommend eating a lot of nuts and seeds, especially clients who have fasted with me and gotten their bodies clean and well functioning. They're not going to need that concentrated fat or protein. We've got people doing this in Sweden, Norway, Finland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, in southern Argentina, a long way from the equator, and people are thriving. And you were in New York City. I spent my first 14 years just outside of Washington, D.C., as you remember, and I felt really good there, and it was great. I remember when I moved Tanglewood 17 years ago to Central America, I brought 2 employees with me. I moved them down, paid to move a car down. We moved a container full of furniture, everything down here to open up the center. And we'd been here for about 2 months or so. And we were having lunch one day, the whole team. But these 2 people who'd moved with me, we all felt great before. But I said to them, "How do you guys feel?" And they said, "We feel amazing." Each of them said this, right? And I said, "Me too." And it's occurred to me, we moved in the summertime. The climate wasn't that different. We were eating the same diet. The biggest difference was we were eating food that was actually fresh, right? And it
Yeah.
makes a huge difference, huge difference. So honestly, people say to me, I mean, I personally wouldn't live again in a city, any place on the planet where I couldn't get high quality fresh produce. I just wouldn't go there. Okay, Florida is perfect. In Florida, you can grow, not everything, but all kinds of things, right? You have an opportunity to grow everything you need yourself. It can all be fresh. You can probably trade with other people close by, but you don't need to be going to the market to buy stuff. Hawaii is the same thing. Southern California, you have some opportunity. It's not quite the same, but there aren't too many other places in the U.S. that I would consider living. And I tell people all the time, hey, folks, if you really want to be as healthy as possible, you have to live in a place where you can get high quality food, right? That's why you and I both wound up in these climates where that's possible.
Yeah, but most people aren't in these climates, and people that come to you and I are already diseased or sick, and we're trying to get them better. So we want to, I think, give them what's best available to them. And
Absolutely. I agree completely with you. Yeah, I still believe that there's nothing better than, I mean, the diet, as you know this as well as I do, cooking destroys nutrients and creates toxic compounds. So cooking is out. We don't have a stove, haven't had a stove for a long time. It's got to be raw, but most
but
vegetables aren't actually easily digestible in their natural state.
yeah, but even cooking. So like when we look at the environment we live in, don't you think somebody that's living in like Minnesota in the wintertime would be better off with maybe a warm soup or a root vegetable steamed instead of maybe watermelon and bananas?
Well, I definitely wouldn't recommend watermelon in Minnesota in the wintertime because it makes you feel cold. But I would recommend eating apples and pears and citrus and late into the fall, the pomegranates and figs. And I mean, what I did when I was living in a place where we had cold winters is I was 100% raw. And every time one of my clients begins to eat cooked food, thinking that's what they need, they invariably wind up feeling and functioning worse than they did before. So I'm completely convinced that although it's challenging, more challenging, obviously, in colder places than it is here in Costa Rica, I still believe we're all better off eating all raw. I really don't believe that there's ever a time that it makes sense to eat cooked food. Now, obviously, people can choose to do that and they're free to do whatever they want. But I don't agree that it's in their best interest because we're, as I'm sure you know, we cook food, we destroy the nutrients, and we create toxic compounds. When you eat the food, your body actually responds with an immune response. It's called digestive leukocytosis, where your body makes white blood cells and sends them to your digestive tract to help you recover from the damage created by cooked food. So I know a lot of people have given up on all raw. I don't think it makes sense. I mean, I have on various occasions over the years eaten some cooked food, and every time I've done it, my body has said, "You're an idiot," and I suffer as a result. And the cleaner the body is, the more I notice it. So,
Yes. You mentioned a person shouldn't overeat on nuts. So my
right.
question to you is, when we look at the amounts of what overeating is or eating too much of something, do you think
Yeah,
it's possible to eat too much fruit?
absolutely. I think it's possible to eat too much of anything. Yeah, I mean, again, Paul, if you look at the longevity experts, they disagree about a lot of things. They don't agree on diets. They don't agree on how long we should be fasting. They don't agree on a lot of things. The one thing that they agree on is that eating more calories than we need means we don't live as long. That eating enough to meet our body's needs, but no more than that, is definitely the shortest path to a longer life. And so I don't care if you have the highest quality fruit in the world and you're living where you picked it, 2 seconds ago before you ate it. Eating too much is still creating a burden for the body. It's not helping. And I know there's a lot of people in the fruitarian world who've been, for years have been pushing people to eat as much as they want, eat as much as possible even. That makes no sense at all.
And yeah, that's what I was going to say. So there are a lot of people now getting into a raw vegan diet online. These new
Yeah.
people, and they call stuff fruitarian, but in all fairness, you know, not all fruits are sweet. So be it. But the thing is, they're eating a lot, and I've learned over the years at least for
Yeah.
my body, that, you know, it doesn't work for me to eat a lot. The less I eat, like you say, to meet our caloric needs and not go over that. But I see these people going over that, and they get away with it because they're young and they're new to this. But
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
Well, you know, first of all, because they're young and because they're just getting started, it's entirely possible that their bodies aren't working very well yet. And eventually, I mean, when I started off, I was probably overeating as well. Not as much as some people do, but I was probably still eating more than I needed to, more than I need now. What happened was, along the way, I realized my body doesn't want that much anymore. I needed much less than I needed in the past. And again, I mean, I've fasted a lot. You know, when I was in the effort to get myself clean and healed after being so sick, I didn't really know what I was doing. I learned the hard way. But I have, and I still fast. I don't know if you remember this about me, probably not, but I've always been just a tiny bit of an adrenaline junkie. So I used to fly small planes. I used to skydive. I still have a motorcycle and a quadricycle. I've rolled a quadricycle twice, broken toes. I've broken 7 of my fingers, 2 of them twice. I've broken both my knees, two of my ribs, my right hip, and I just rock climbing. I mean, things that where there's the likelihood of injury. And in each case, I fasted to heal myself, and done amazingly well. I mean, healed very rapidly, even at my age. I only fast nowadays to heal injuries, but I've done a lot of fasting as a result. So my body's pretty clean, and the cleaner it gets, the more efficient it is. I mean, I'm not promoting breatharianism. I'm not suggesting eventually we get down to 0. That seems silly to me. You know, maybe it's possible. I'm not even sure that means it's optimal. But I do encourage people to eat far less, you know, to make sure. In fact, let me say it this way: I used to be accused of promoting caloric restriction by some of these people that were promoting high caloric diets. And my response was always the same. I don't promote caloric restriction. I've never encouraged anyone to restrict anything. What I encourage people to do is to allow their bodies to become as efficient as possible. Because when we're as efficient as possible, we don't need more. We don't desire more.
And I agree with you. And there's other reasons people are eating, emotional reasons and so on. But when everything's in the right place, we're going to get control over all those things, and
Right.
also physically. So a lot of people out there that are promoting. So what you're saying is, if I got this correct, for the clarification of everybody watching, is the majority of our food should be fruits. However, not to overeat on fruit.
That's correct. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, again, look, I remember I was on the wrestling team at the U.S. Air Force Academy. I wasn't any good. Anyone could be on the wrestling team. I joined it because the coach guaranteed us that we'd be in the best shape we'd ever been in by the end of the season. And it was true. So, but back then, I was easily eating 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day. We were working out 3 hours every single day. It was crazy intense. And I was 20 years old, 21 years old. Today, 40 years later, I eat literally a fraction, 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day on average. Now, some days are more, no question. I mean, we still do a durian feast every once in a while, and I'll eat more than I normally would. There may be some days where I'll eat more if it's gourmet raw. I'll still indulge in that when I travel sometimes. But here, it's mono meals of papayas, mono meals of watermelon, pineapples, mangoes, my favorite bananas, all kinds of fruits. I mean, lots of different things. But it's far fewer calories than I ever ate before. And I find the exact same thing with my clients. They need a lot less than they thought they needed in the past.
Okay. Well, I'm loving this interview. This is so wonderful and important stuff. And I'm going to put your links below. Everybody go in the description below if you want to get Lauren's links to the Healing Center, the Fasting Retreat, Tanglewood that he has there in Costa Rica, his website, all his information is below the video. So Lauren, tell us, like, to me, one of my things is the body was designed to heal itself, and
Right.
heal when we're sleeping. That's where healing takes place. So for me, one of my goals is to put my clients in a place where they could give their body the best healing possible, the best rest possible. And that is going to sleep on an empty stomach, eating simply, working on
Right.
digestion. But the
Exactly.
goal is my approach is to put themselves in a place where they can get the best sleep possible, the most
Uh-huh.
efficient and effective sleep. And there are people that tell me that have been on a raw vegan diet for many years that I interview that they only need 4 or 5 hour nights of sleep. But then I've interviewed some other people and they say 7 or 8 hours is good for them, even though they can get
Yeah.
by on less 7 or 8 hours. And
Yeah.
then, but the average person eating a standard American diet, they can't even limit. There's no limit. They need coffee to stay awake.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
For me, I know, even if I can get by on less than 8 hours, I know I love to get, enough. And, so what my point being is for you, how
Yeah.
much sleep after being on this raw vegan diet for this long
Yeah.
do you get?
Yeah, well, I agree with the latter group. I mean, I know a lot of people who, like you, who say, I'm fine with 4 or 5 hours. And the truth is, not only can I get by on that much, but on average, I probably get between 5 and 6 hours a night. Now, I also know that I feel better when I get more. And you may not remember this, but I've always taught the same thing. For me, when I was trying to figure out my way, what do I do? What should I eat? How much sleep should I get? All these questions that we have to negotiate if we want to take our health to an amazing level. The question that occurred to me was, okay, well, we're tropical animals, right? Even in Florida, you're probably not going to want to run around in your birthday costume 365 days a year. Okay, in Costa Rica, you could do it, right? We're tropical. We can only do it in the tropics. So we're clearly tropical animals still. We use clothing and buildings and heating systems to live anywhere on the planet. We're creating a micro tropical, a sub, what do we call that? A microclimate inside of our clothes, tropical microclimate. But my question was, well, if I lived here in the tropical jungle, like other species, outside in nature, not in a building in the jungle like I've got here, but outside in nature, how much sleep would I get? Well, you've been down here, you're right in the tropics. You probably are aware that at the equator, there's 12 hours of light and 12 hours of dark. Now, we're not at the equator, we're several hundred miles north. We still have 11-hour nights or so every night of the year, at least 11 hours of darkness. Okay. So if you live in the jungle, I mean, we have no flashlights, we've got no cell phones, we're living outside in nature. Are you going to be walking around, wandering around the jungle in the dark? Because I'm not. My guess is when it starts to get dark, we're going to find a comfortable place to rest, and we're going to stay there until it's light enough for us to be able to see again. And that means we're resting 10, 11 hours, up to 12 hours every single night of the year. That's what I think we should be. We don't have to be asleep the whole time, but I think we'd be resting that much. Okay. That's what I think we should be doing. I can't imagine how I can do that. In addition to Tanglewood, a couple of years ago, I started the Academy for Vibrant Living. We now have 2 online self-paced courses, including a certified coaching health coach course. I have this enormous project called Las Cascadas. We're creating a huge eco preserve, a nature preserve, 2 intentional communities, a botanical garden, an enormous permaculture-based fruit farm. It's a $25 million project. And I'm writing a book. I don't have a lot of free time. So I rarely get more than 5 hours of sleep, but I know I need it. I know I'd be better off getting it. And honestly, I think I only do as well as I do because my diet's been as clean as it has been for so long. And I've fasted to get my body clean. Most people, I mean, even myself, I'm sure I'm hurting myself because we know that not getting enough sleep has significantly detrimental impact on the body, on the health.
And I wrote a book actually called The Daylight Diet because I think,
I remember that.
You say, we wouldn't be eating in the dark. We'd be resting.
Exactly.
And
I remember that came out quite a while ago.
Yes, yes. And I still stick to it as being such an important impact that many people are missing. So
Absolutely.
at your retreat, do you consider that like do you have, I know it's a fasting retreat, but when people do eat or when you do your teachings, do you tell people it doesn't matter when you eat, or do you tell people, look, don't eat right before going to sleep? How much do you consider when somebody's eating?
Oh no, I think it's really, really important. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because one of the things I used to hear when I first started posting videos on YouTube 10 or so years ago, I would get comments from Muslims who would say, "Oh, we've been fasting in the Muslim religion, forever. We know all about this. And I'd say, hang on. Ramadan's quite different. Ramadan's quite different. We're talking about people going 21 to 42 days consuming only water. That's it, nothing else. No supplements, no salt, just water, spring water. You guys are talking about going 12 to 15 hours, depending on where on the planet you are, from sunrise to sunset. That's the fast every day for a month. But that's it. They're eating at the worst times of the day, before the sun comes up and after the sun's gone down.
Exactly.
Not a good idea. I agree with you completely. Now, practically, you're in Florida in July. You've got sunlight until probably 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, right?
Yes.
It's still daylight. So here, it's already dark. It's what is it, 6:40? It's dark outside. To be honest, I have breakfast most days at 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon because I work from 5 a.m. until then without a break. And so I've eaten once today. I will eat again. It'll be when we're done. But that means it's going to already be an hour after dark, roughly. It's not ideal, but I don't think it's terrible. I'm still not going to go to bed for several hours. Ideally, what we would do is, just as you wrote all those years ago, we should be eating in daylight hours because that's the only time we would eat if we actually lived in nature. That's ideal. It's ideal because our bodies are working differently when there's daylight. As soon as the sun goes down, everything starts to slow down. The closer to bedtime we eat, the more problematic it is, the more it negatively impacts our sleep and our digestion. So we're compromising everything that way. It's a bad idea.
Sure. I know you said, switching gears here, I know you said you fast only when you feel a need to recover, but
Right.
in your journey of fasting and that led up to your knowledge of it, what's the longest water fast that you have done?
Yeah, this is always surprising for people because I've now taken 600+ people on fasts of 42 days or longer, with the longest one being 18 and a half weeks, 4.5 months. Okay, just water. This is a young guy who was
How many days is that off? So 30, 60?
It's 120, I think it was 128 days, if I remember correctly. He had stage 4 testicular cancer, and by the time we were done, there was no trace of cancer. And he had lots of reserves, right? And we run on body fat, so he had plenty of reserves. I personally have never gone more than 21 days, but I've done it many, many times. And by the time I realized I could go longer being relatively lean, I was working so much, it was hard to do. I haven't had a day off in 13 years. When we're closed here, prior to the pandemic, can I say that word here? Prior to that, every time we had a break, I was on a lecture tour. And that doesn't happen so much. I just came back from one of the Balkans a month ago, but that was the first one in 2.5 years. And prior to that, I was always traveling to speak. Even now, half my time was speaking and half my time was just vacationing and enjoying beautiful places. I'm still working 5 hours roughly every day on calls with clients, fasting people remotely or doing consultation calls. And so I don't, it's hard for me to imagine taking a longer period of time off when I'm working as much as I do. Someday I'd love to do a longer fast.
Well, the question must come up by people is how can you fast people more than 21 days when you haven't done that yourself?
Well, the answer is, having taken more than 10,000 people through fasts averaging 26 days, more than anyone else alive today, I'm pretty confident. I think I know a few things about it, even though I think it's really important to do quite a bit of fasting. One of my competitors has done one fast of 21 days and then fast 1 week a year ever since. And that's it. That's all he's done. I've now fasted more than 3.5 years of my life cumulatively.
Well, let me rephrase it. I know you said you were busy. The question, I know you said you've been busy and that's why you haven't been able to complete more than the 25 days fast or 25 days fast. But like, just for your own personal experience.
No, it'd be amazing. I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it. But I've got 4 people completing 26-day fast this weekend, and I've got several more completing a 30-day fast, in a few more days on Monday. And I do this all the time, all year long, without stop. So even though I haven't gone longer than 21 myself, I still know. It's not as if I've never fasted. I fasted a lot. I just haven't gone more than 20.
Now, okay, now with the blood test, I know you said you don't want to waste money on all this blood tests and all this stuff. Now, the people you fast, do you
Yeah,
look at their vital signs, or do you ever look at things
absolutely.
like this?
We look at vital signs every single day. I have a nurse on staff, and we check blood pressure, pulse, temperature, blood oxygen saturation. We use bioimpedance device, a pretty sophisticated one, and look at muscle mass, body fat, hydration levels. Did I mention blood sugar? And we check these things every day. Blood sugar we'll normally check once a week unless there's a reason to do it more often. But we check these every day. I speak with every client every day. And if we need to, we check it more than once a day. We also require our clients now, and we didn't used to do this, but we now require everyone to get their sodium, potassium, and chloride electrolyte levels checked prior to fasting. Because while we almost never run into problems with people with electrolytes, it can happen. It's a very serious issue if it happens, and it can occur. In most cases where we run into, I mean, I should say it can be a serious issue. In most cases where we've run into these issues, we just need to give someone a little bit of sodium or potassium. Even if they go to the hospital and get IVs, they're usually back in a day or two and are fine. But we had a problem. We had a woman wind up in the hospital, and I realized the only way that occurs, I mean, usually it only occurs if someone's vomiting 5 times a day for weeks at a time, at least using the protocol I use. The only people who were getting into trouble were people doing that. And that's pretty rare. I had a woman vomit twice after completing her fast on her second day of her feeding. She vomited only twice, and the next morning was incoherent. She was conscious but incoherent. So we got her to the hospital. Sure enough, her sodium was very low. And she came back to fast with me a year later for the 3rd time. She'd already fasted with me twice. But I said to her in advance, I said, look, 2 months before you come, I want you to get these electrolyte levels checked. Because I had a sense, I think she's got a problem. They're going to be low. They were super low. I had her supplement with celery juice, something I normally wouldn't do, but I had her drink celery juice every day for 2 or 3 times a day for 2 months. And when she got here, her levels were fine. And we got her through the 3rd fast with no problem. Okay. So we now, for the last couple of years, and from now on, everyone gets these levels checked before they start to make sure that they're okay. If they're okay when they start, it's very unlikely they're not going to be okay.
Okay, so you mentioned juicing celery. Juicing in general, do you juice at all in general yourself?
No, I don't. I mean, I'll drink a glass of juice, maybe a few times a year as a special treat. But with fruit juices, celery juice, beet juice, these juices all have a lot of sugar. And when you take the fiber away, you are tripling the glycemic load of the juice. So it has much more impact on your sugar and insulin levels. And we want to obviously leave those things alone. With green juices, what you're getting is 50% protein, and it's concentrated because you're getting rid of all the fiber. I mean, lettuce is a lot of water, some fiber. When you juice it, you can consume a lot more that way. So it's concentrated protein, and research is very clear that the more protein we eat, the faster we age and die. So I don't recommend using juices. There's lots of issues with them. In addition to the ones I've mentioned, they're fragmented. They're largely oxidized. We wind up concentrating heavy water, which occurs everywhere. Heavy water is in everything, but when we juice, we wind up concentrating. It's not good for us. So I recommend and eat only whole foods most of the time.
Okay, okay. And even for people that can't do a water fast but need a break from food, you wouldn't recommend juice fasting, not on fruit juice, but on juice.
Yeah, no, I really don't believe that juices are particularly good for us. I'll ask you the question I ask my clients. I think you and I can probably agree that watermelons and oranges and apples, for instance, are all optimal foods for us, right?
Yeah, yes, but I recently have a problem with watermelon. But yes,
Okay,
other,
take watermelon out.
yeah.
Apples, oranges, add whatever you want. These are let's call these things perfect foods. You can make the list. Okay.
Sure.
How do we improve on perfection?
Well, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
Can't improve. As soon as we take something, we put it through a machine where we're oxidizing much of what's there. I mean, the only study I found so far was a commercial tomato pressing operation, not a juicer, not a blender. It was a hydraulic press where they're making tomato sauce or tomato paste. And what happened was 40% of the vitamin C was lost in 3 minutes. Okay, in a juicer or blender, it's significantly greater losses are occurring. And so why? Why not just eat the whole food? When people come to me and say, I can't, I can't water fast, I'm not willing to water fast, whatever it is, I would say, okay, great. Here's what you do then. For the next month, eat only high water content fruits, things that are low glycemic load, right? So not tons of bananas, no dates, no dried fruits at all, ever really, ideally, but focus on melons and papayas if you can get them. And you can eat grapefruits and oranges, pomelos, you can eat strawberries, and most of the other berries are excellent. Blueberries are relatively low in water. Eat these high water content fruits. You don't have to do one. I think that's a bad idea. These mono islands that people do for 30 days. That winds up with creating deficiencies and imbalances because no one food is going to have everything we need. So eat a variety, but every meal should be mono, and don't overeat. And eat, for most people, if they were to live on watermelon and papayas for a week, their body would detoxify quite a bit. Just doing that.
So here's my issue with watermelon in general, and I want to know what you think about this. So I definitely believe the best quality foods for our body are the highest water content water foods. Even when it comes to the fruits, the best fruits are the ones that have the most water content. But I was interviewing another person who says they haven't drinking water for like 20 years because their water they get from the high fruits that they eat. So they don't drink water, they get it from the fruits they eat. And even that more important is when you're eating unorganic food, you're eating, like I always used to try to get organic when I could, but it made me realize how bad unorganic food truly is. Now, if you're eating a high water content fruits and they're not organic, and I would think about watermelon, I love watermelon, but if you're eating an unorganic watermelon, you're pretty much eating a good high amount of water that's saturated with chemicals. And so unlike a banana where yes, it doesn't have the high water content, but if it's an unorganic banana, you don't have all these as much toxins in it.
I hear you. I actually like to respond to two different points here.
Okay.
First of all, fortunately, both watermelons and bananas and papayas and pineapples, these are all among some of the foods that are the least heavily sprayed. Listen, I've always said the exact same thing, Paul. I mean, again, when I started Tanglewood back in Bethesda, Maryland, 26.5 years ago, we bought 100% organic produce for our clients. It was expensive and much more difficult to get. There was no Whole Foods back then. It was a different world, at least not where we were. And so, but I believe that's the only thing I want to put in my body. Why am I going to give anything else to my clients? Okay. But for people that can't get organic, I think watermelon is actually one of the safer things to eat because it actually has relatively low spray. Now, again, much better organic, absolutely. You said something that I think is even more important, and it's become a trend, and I think I want to respond to this. So 16 and a half years ago, we began measuring people's hydration levels with a $500 bioimpedance device. It's a fairly sophisticated device. The most dehydrated people we see are people who come to us having had a practice of dry fasting. Okay, these people are always severely dehydrated. And here's the crazy thing. They often think they've healed themselves of various things. As soon as we get their bodies rehydrated, all their symptoms come back.
When you say a practice of dry fasting, I mean, that's a regular base, but there's a difference between, okay, I'm just like an animal in nature. I'm not going to eat or drink for 3 days and let's say in 6 years. I did that once versus the practice of doing it every week. So
a lot of people are doing it several times a year, whatever it might be. That's what I mean by practice. I don't mean every week or every day. I mean regularly. Okay. And listen, again, I know a little bit about fasting now. And I've looked at all the animals. I've thought about this quite a bit. It's interesting. I was teaching a full day seminar in Gdansk, Poland, about 5 years ago, and I was talking about this issue. And I said, animals in nature. I said, I was explaining the differences. I said, it's true. Animals in nature don't typically drink water when they fast. Man raised his hand. I said, yeah. He said, Lauren. He said, I'm a large animal veterinarian. You're absolutely right. Animals fast to heal. That's what they do. Every species on the planet does that when they're sick enough or badly enough injured. Fasting is nature's way of allowing the organism to cleanse and heal. We're self-cleansing and self-healing. Fasting just lets us get out of the body's way. But what he said was, when animals in nature are dehydrated, they look for water when fasting. They don't ever dry fast, because dry fasting, people say, for the next week or 10 days, I'm not drinking any water. I've seen interviews with people, they could barely speak, they were so dehydrated. No, they could barely stand up, but they're not drinking water, even though their body is, is begging them, pleading with them to take water. They're not doing it because they believe it's better. Animals drink when they need water because, see, the difference is animals have always eaten their optimal diet. You and I mean, how old were you when you switched? 30 years? 25?
Yeah, 27 years.
You were 27. I was 30 when I changed my diet.
Oh, 27 years I've been doing this. I switched when I was 19.
You were 19. Okay. You were 19. So I was 30 years old. Okay. Even 19 years eating conventionally means, I promise you, if you haven't done a properly conducted long enough fast, you've got pounds and pounds of old hard waste in your body. And I know that because every client of mine who follows my simple directions eliminates pounds and pounds of old hard waste every single time. This is what happens. And so when that stuff is in your body, it's acting like a giant sponge. It's very difficult, probably impossible, to ever get hydrated until you get that stuff out of your body. And the impact of that is amazing, because the wrinkles that we see on most people, I mean, frankly, most people my age have a lot more wrinkles than I do. That's because I'm the best hydrated person we've ever measured. Okay, because I've done this and it's stayed with us a long time. When these people who they've been eating a raw vegan diet for a while, whatever it is, and they're thinking, well, I'm getting all my water from watermelons and papayas and mangoes, and etc. They're not. They're the next most dehydrated people we see after the dry fasting people, more than people eating conventionally who are drinking water and other beverages. Okay, the people eating perfectly, in my opinion, but not drinking water, if they haven't already got their body clean, they're doing themselves a huge and grave disservice.
Yeah, in all fairness, the person that said he drinks like several coconuts a day, so he gets his water from coconuts. Do you think that's sufficient enough?
Well, I think it is. I mean, I don't know how much, it depends how big the coconuts are, how much water that is, and how much he needs. I could, if I had his vital signs, I could tell you if he's getting enough water or not. But the problem with doing that, I mean, I'm here, we have amazing coconuts. They're the best I've had anywhere in the world. And I've been in 70 countries. The problem is that coconuts have calories and nutrients. So if I'm drinking coconuts between meals, my digestive tract never rests. Okay, so here we have perfect spring water bubbling up out of the ground on site. That's why I bought this lab. And this is the only thing I drink here. I mean, we have coconuts. I've got probably 100 in the kitchen right now, but I probably drink a few a month, because I only drink them when it's going to be a meal for me. I'm not drinking them all day long. I want my digestive system to rest as completely as possible. But yes, if he's doing that, he's getting at least some very high quality structured water into his body.
That's my next question. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, finish.
I was just going to say, most people that are eating raw vegan and not drinking water, we see them all the time here. I mean, because I'm raw now for all these years. I mean, of this group, I asked yesterday in the lecture time, how many of you have spent at least a month eating only fruit and salad, and more than half the group raised their hand. That doesn't mean they're doing it all the time, but we get a lot of raw vegans here. Most of these people are severely dehydrated, even if they're not drinking water, severely.
That was my next question, was the type of water. Now, you kind of answered it. You said you have a fresh spring there. And I always tell everyone the best water you can get is a fresh spring that's not near a nuclear power plant, like Zephyr's Hills or something. But you're getting fresh spring water. But realistically, most people don't have access to fresh spring water. So what water do you recommend for people in realistic terms?
Well, I mean, for people that don't have a spring nearby where the water's clean, because the fact that it's coming out of the ground doesn't mean you should drink it. You want to get it checked. I mean, I've been here now on this particular site for 9.5 years. We still have it checked regularly throughout the year, several times a year. We pay to get samples, send them to a lab, because the conditions can change in nature. We want to make sure it's always safe to drink. But for people that don't have a spring nearby where there's good drinkable water, you can buy good bottled spring water. that's probably the next best choice. And after that, my recommendation is reverse osmosis water. And I don't love it, but it's still pretty good because while I mean, it takes out the chlorine and fluoride if it's there, it takes out most of the minerals, which is a problem, but it leaves in about 10%. If you're using like a home RO unit, you're still going to have about 10% of the minerals in. Distillation, on the other hand, will take out virtually all the minerals. And we need those minerals. We need the inorganic minerals in the water so that the water can cross cell membranes and conduct electricity, which is what we run on, microcurrent. If we take all the minerals out, what we're guaranteed of happening is that negatively charged water is going to latch on to positively charged particles in our bloodstream, including sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. These are all positively charged. So they're going to be escorted right out of your bloodstream if you're drinking distilled water.
Now, I was under the impression that reverse osmosis, just like distilled water, took out all the minerals.
No, it's fortunately, I mean, again, I have two clients, they're brothers from India that have been, excuse me, they're Indian descent from Sydney, Australia. They've been incredibly successful businessmen, both millionaires by the time they were 30. And so they lived together, or they did, I'm not anymore, but they bought, we were doing a consultation, and I said, if you can't get spring water, get a good home RO unit. So what they did was they went out and bought the very best reverse osmosis filtration unit you can buy. In scientific laboratories where they need the purest water possible, they don't use distillation. They use the very best reverse osmosis units. But these things take out everything, okay? You don't want to drink that water. That's not fit for human consumption. That's what they bought because they had, money was not an issue. They thought, let's buy the best thing we can. For, I think, $150, $200, I think, you can get a countertop RO unit or something that goes under the kitchen sink and have a separate faucet. And that leaves in about 10% of the minerals. That's still okay.
But aren't you defeating the purpose? Because with taking out everything, you're not just taking out the minerals, you're taking out any of the toxins and everything else. But if 10% of the minerals are still getting through because of the lack of the RO process and what's going on, isn't 10% or some type of percent coming through of the toxins that wouldn't necessarily come through if you were getting the high unit?
Well, fortunately, the most important things that we're trying to filter out are bigger. I mean, basically, the way these units work is, with RO, you're forcing water through a pressure, through a filter. And so it depends on the micron size of the holes. And the very finest, the most expensive scientific RO units have little tiny holes that only water molecule can get through. The units I'm talking about allow some minerals, inorganic minerals to get through, but they don't allow fluoride and chlorine to get through. And so there may still be some things in the water, but it's still considered very pure water and far safer to drink, in my opinion, than distilled water. Again, I know you're religious. I was in Israel doing a 3-4 day, I forget, this was some years back, doing a 3 or 4 day weekend seminar in Jerusalem, at a center in Jerusalem. And we're talking about this issue, and a man raises his hand and says, Lauren, he said, I'm a scientist. I work in a laboratory every day, for 30 years. We use distilled water there for scientific experiments. It is labeled with the skull and crossbones because we're completely clear it is not fit for human consumption. So the difference is it has no minerals in it. Okay, our water should have some. It naturally, like rain, always has minerals in it, always.
What if somebody is using distilled water and they add like sea salt to it or something else to just put some minerals in it? Is that better or worse?
Well, I mean, it's problematic. I mean, if you're eating food, it's probably okay to do that. I wouldn't do it personally. I mean, why try to fix something that's broken? Again, what I would do is try to find good spring water instead. But the problem with it, especially for fasting people, is as soon as we add anything to the water, I mean, when this water bubbles up out of the ground, so it's going through the natural hydrological cycle, right? And it picks up minerals from the rock, from the earth as it comes up. And we use a paper filter to make sure there's no sediment, but it's still going to have these little tiny mineral particles suspended. We can't see anything. It looks completely clear, but we have it tested, it's in there. That's good. When we add something to the water, our body interacts with that differently. It knows it's been added. And now it says, oh, there must be some food coming. There's nutrients here. we don't want to trigger that response by the body. We want the body to think it's just water.
But wouldn't it do the same thing even if there's minerals in it? Like I know in the old days, the people fasted with distilled water
Some
to
people still
avoid,
do.
yeah,
Some people still do.
but the point was to avoid the minerals in the water that would react like you're eating, because true fasting, right? Isn't it just fasting is just like, you're really on a water diet because fasting is depending if you're getting water
That's
with minerals in it, right?
right, but animals, again, animals in nature do drink water when they need to while fasting, and they're drinking water that contains minerals in it. There's no problem as long as the minerals in the water are naturally occurring as part of the natural hydrological cycle. It doesn't trigger the body to think there's food coming. But as soon as we add anything, it's your body recognizes that as different. And so it triggers this response. And I know this because we see people all the time. There's a guy out there you may know. He promotes something called the snake diet. And this is fasting, but he's adding sodium chloride and potassium chloride to the water to make sure you don't have electrolyte problems. People say to me, oh, it's much easier this way. And they sometimes come here after they've done that. And I say, well, of course it's much easier because you're not really fasting. Okay. What happens when we take that out, and we're drinking spring water that does contain some minerals, but we haven't added them in. The body interacts with that completely differently.
Do you think distilled water leaches calcium from the bones, like people say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, it's whether it's not leaching it directly from the bones, but calcium is so we store most calcium in the body in the bones. We store a little bit in the bloodstream, and we need to have it in the bloodstream. It's a necessary electrolyte. So here's what happens: we drink distilled water, which, as I said, is negatively charged. Okay, as you probably remember from high school, even elementary school science class, you take a positively charged magnet, it attracts a negatively charged magnet. So a negatively charged anything is going to attract anything positively charged. And the problem is that calcium and potassium and magnesium and sodium are all positively charged electrolytes. So when we consume something that's negatively charged, it's latching onto those and escorting them out of the body. It's escorting them out of the bloodstream. What happens is, because we now don't have them in the bloodstream, let's say it's taken up enough calcium, we have a problem, your body is going to give up calcium from your bones and teeth because you need it to stay alive. So that's what's going to happen.
All right, we know how bad tap water is. We all agree how bad tap water is, but there's something that's promoted. It's called a Berkeley filter, which is pretty much you're taking tap water, then you're filling up a container, and it has these filters in there that are supposed to filter out everything. And to test it, they actually have a red dye test where you put red dye in the water to confirm that it's like truly it comes out clear that they're working and they're getting everything out. What's your opinion with something like that?
Yeah. I think the only questions really worth asking, I mean, we want to test for certain specific things. So does it pull out all the chlorine and fluoride? Because these are carcinogenic chemicals that the government adds to the water.
They don't. But what they do is if you're not getting it from a well and if you're using tap water, you can buy an attachment that's supposed to be a fluoride filter.
Yeah, I mean, could be that works. I don't know, but I mean, that's what I'd be looking at. First of all, is that happening? Again, I wouldn't want something that's going to pull out everything. I doubt they do, but I'd look at that. The distilled water people insist that you want 0 total dissolved solids, but again, that's not what you want. That's completely unnatural. We want water that mimics as closely as possible the perfect water. I mean, think about
you got the perfect water.
Well, I mean, look, there's 25 million animal species on the planet. What are they drinking? They don't have distillers. They're drinking water from springs and streams, and they thrive doing it.
Absolutely, that's the best water. Absolutely. So just to sum up, you're saying most of this lower expensive filters, or even if you go to the supermarket and you fill up with that RO water, they probably still have some stuff in there, and that'd be probably the second best thing to good spring water.
Yeah, I mean, you might, again, with the problem with RO filters is they need to be maintained. And so I don't know if you've ever had the experience of doing this, but if you go to one of these grocery store machines where you can stick your bottle and fill it up with RO, sometimes it doesn't taste very good. And that's probably because they didn't maintain it the way they needed to. And so there's stuff getting through. But handled properly, that water can, in fact, prior to moving here, and again, we've been here now for 9.5 years of the 26.5 years that Tanglewood has existed. So for 17 years, we used reverse osmosis water. Still got amazing results.
That's personally what I do is I go to the supermarket, but there's a date on there and you could check when it was last serviced.
Right.
And I mean, we're all to a degree slaves to the honesty of servicemen that are doing these things. Same thing
Right.
with most things. So, but they show the service that's being used, like when it was last used and so on. And I used to have an RO system in my house.
Right.
And then with a TDS monitor, I measured the water from the machine at the store, and it was cleaner than just
What
a
do you
little
had at home?
cleaner, just a
Yeah.
little cleaner.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
knew
I
it
mean,
was pretty good.
no, I think they can be very high quality,
Yeah.
but it does depend on maintenance.
And if it's too good quality, then you got to run into a problem. You get everything out. So, but it's
It's-
definitely a challenge. It's definitely something that challenges people. So I'm glad we spoke about that.
Yeah.
And so tell us for people that are watching, people that are suffering from everything from cancer to arthritis to everything, just like the animals in nature, fasting is what they do when they're sick.
That's right.
And the body was designed to heal. So
Yes.
yes, so
Yeah, our bodies, I mean, yeah, healing, first of all, let's start here.
Sure.
Healing is a biological process. And what that means is that only the body can heal the body. Only the body can cleanse the body. I can't take something that's going to cleanse or heal. That's impossible. Okay. People say the raw food diet healed their body or green smoothies healed their body. That's not true. What's true is that if you go from a standard American diet to a raw vegan diet, you're putting far less burden on your body by cleaning up your diet. Now your body has more energy available to heal itself. The diet doesn't heal you, the body does. Fasting is used by every species because it's the best way to get completely out of the body's way. If it's done properly, if you're resting as completely as possible, you're not doing anything you don't need to do, you're sipping enough water, not too much, but the right amount, your body now has the best conditions to be able to cleanse and heal. And so we've had 100% success eliminating hypertension with more than 400 clients over the years. We've had 100% success with more than 125, 135 probably now type 2 diabetics. We have great rates of success with all kinds of issues because our amazing bodies were meant to heal. And when we give them the right conditions and opportunity, that's almost always what happens.
What's your opinion of regularly fasting, water fasting 1 day a week?
Well, I did that for 2.5 years and thought that was great. And then I started to understand the process better. This was a long time ago. And what I realized was, okay, it takes the body 2.5 to 3 days to actually move from consuming primarily muscle to consuming primarily fat, which is where most of the toxins are. So maybe I'd be better off doing 4 days, 4 days at a time, once a month. And I started doing that. And then I thought, okay, it takes the body 10 to 11 days where you're fully into ketosis. So, and you can go dry, you go into ketosis right away because your poor body, which is already dehydrated, is desperately looking for water, which we get by metabolizing fat. But if the body is trying to stay alive, being in ketosis faster doesn't mean it's cleansing or healing. It just means it's trying to keep itself alive. So I think that it does make sense to fast for 1, 2, 3 days when your body's calling for it. So if you wake up next week, and your head's full of mucus, or you've got a fever, or there's something else going on, what I would do if I could is I would stay in bed and just sip water. Okay, that's it. I wouldn't do anything else. I wouldn't eat anything. I wouldn't take any medications ever. No drugs, period. They're garbage, toxic, harmful. They're not the way. Okay. I've taken literally, I don't know if you know this, the average person my age in the US takes 5 different medications every day. In the last 30 years, I've taken 2 ibuprofen. And that was only because I broke my hip and was in so much pain I couldn't sleep 4 nights in a row. So I took one so I could sleep, and I took one the next night. Then I flushed the rest down the toilet because I don't want that crap in my body. Fasting is the way. It works for virtually everything. Done properly.
Sure. I bet you slept good when you took those though, right?
Well, it was enough to relax me enough that I could fall asleep.
Yes.
It helped.
All right. So Do you think a raw vegan diet is best for everyone?
Only for people who are still alive.
Okay, so you think for everyone who's alive. What about not just from a physical standpoint, but what about the social standpoint? Do you still think it's ideal for everyone?
Well,
100%
I mean,
raw?
I mean, I mean, listen, it's first of all, I think each of us has to decide what's most important to us. I realized a long time ago that I wanted to feel and function as well as possible. The interesting thing is, I mean, we talked about this very thing today at lecture time. I talked about the social aspects and how to get through life in the world, and it's difficult for a lot of people. It was never difficult for me because I was completely clear. I was very confident about the fact that this is what I was going to do and this is what made the most sense for me. And so, when you're confident, people pretty much leave you alone. If you're afraid, dogs attack when you're afraid. People do the same thing. So if you're not very confident about it, people are going to attack you. No one gives me a hard time about this. They can quickly see that even if they try to, I don't care what they think, right? Honestly, I know this is what makes sense. And so for me, in social situations, I eat what I choose to eat, fruit or salad. If there's no fruit or salad, I won't eat anything. I'll sip water while other people eat. It doesn't bother me at all. And it doesn't create a problem. You probably know what I'm about to say is true. When someone gets on stage to give a talk, and I've seen you give talks, you see me give talks, we've both seen people who are very uncomfortable being up there. When they're uncomfortable, everyone watching is uncomfortable. Okay. So as long as I'm comfortable with what I'm doing, I could be in a setting where everyone else is eating and I'm not. If I'm comfortable, it's not a problem for anyone. If I'm uncomfortable, then it creates an issue. So when I first went raw, I still lived outside of Washington D.C. in a house in a neighborhood close to where I grew up. I mean, my Tanglewood's first location where you visited me was in the same neighborhood as my high school. Okay, I had a friend that grew up across the street and one that grew up next door. A lot of my old buddies were around, and I still went to parties with people. I mean, it became less fun when everyone's getting drunk and I'm not interested in drinking anymore. But I still would get together with my old buddies because we had this history. The fact that my diet was there, it did matter. When I'm in Miami, one of my best friends, my oldest friends from 6 years old, is a captain for American Airlines and lives in Fort Lauderdale. And if I'm in that area, we'll get together, and he'll eat whatever he's eating, and I'm eating fruit or salad. It's not a problem. It doesn't have to be an issue.
Okay. Two more topics, and then we're going to close for the night here.
Sure.
This was
Sure.
wonderful. And I want everyone post your comments or questions below because we'd love to have Lauren back to answer some of these questions and maybe even doing a live Q&A one night.
Sure.
One topic is I have personally found one of the keys to success long-term on a raw vegan diet is exercise.
Yeah.
And I'm a fitness maniac. I can say I think about it all the time. So
Yeah.
how important, I know you're a fasting retreat here and so on, but in your own personal life,
Yep.
how much time I know you're very busy, but how much time do you make for fitness?
Well, to be completely transparent, and I prefer to be completely honest, there are times where life gets busy or stressful, and I might stop exercising, and then I may go a month or two without doing much. Now, even when I'm not doing much, I'm pretty active. I'm usually, we've got 37 acres. I oversee the team myself. I mean, I decide what gets planted where. I've designed all the paths and gardens here, and so I'm usually outside in the gardens at least half an hour a day, walking, and usually briskly through to see what's going on, see how our progress is, even now. But most of the time, and I've done this now since I was 14 years old. I've worked out nearly every day. I mean, again, there are these breaks that happen sometimes, but generally speaking, I work out every day. I do push-ups and full body weight dips. I'll do some squats sometimes. I used to run every day until I broke my hip. I never got back into it. Sprinting up a hill, not distance running. Yesterday, once a week, I take an afternoon. I see clients in the morning instead of the afternoon after the lecture, and I go to the beach and I body surf. And yesterday I was in the water for an hour or more body surfing. It's pretty intense. It's pretty active. I spent probably another half an hour or more on the beach playing Frisbee, again, pretty active, throwing and running. And I mean, I like to be physically active. I don't feel good if I'm not physically active. I like to spend at least a half an hour a day doing physical activity. Now, it'd be great to do more, but right now that's what my lifestyle recommends. Honestly, I teach people that you can, I'm still really fit and strong for a guy my age, and I find it relatively easy to maintain that because of the diet that we eat. It's not so hard.
Okay, I'm going to add another topic because this is important. So
Okay.
I've done a good amount of fasting, and I actually fasted a couple years ago, 30 days on water, and I had bowel movement 5 and 7 days into the fast, and I fasted several weeks, a good amount of times, and I've always ended up having a bowel movement at some point later on into the fast.
Right.
So how important is that when somebody's fasting long term for them to have a bowel movement? And I believe under normal circumstances, you don't recommend enemas or colonics, but if somebody definitely
Correct.
hasn't had a bowel movement, under any circumstances, do you recommend enema or colonic?
Yeah, there is a circumstance. The condition I'd recommend it in is when someone is in severe pain because they need to eliminate and are unable to. So last night, yesterday evening, I got an email from a client. She is in somewhere in the center of Canada, one of those, I forget which one, Alberta, I think, southern Alberta, Canada. She's fasting with me remotely. Yesterday was day 26. Today was day 27 of a 28-day process. She'd already fasted, was refeeding, hadn't been able to eliminate because she was moving this old hard mass of material. And she said to me, I feel like I need to do something. I don't want to go to the hospital. Is it okay to do an enema? I was like, yeah, it's okay if you need to, go ahead. You don't want to do it more often than necessary, but go ahead and do it. So she did. She was able to pass something. She felt a whole lot better today. But coming back to your original question, let's look at what happens in an ideal situation. Okay, you begin you have your last meal. Okay, let's say I'm going to fast tomorrow. So tonight I have a salad, whatever. My last meal of the day is usually a green salad or a couple of papayas, or 3 or 4 mangoes, or maybe 10 or 12 small bananas and some lettuce. That's my meal. I have my meal. 8 to 12 hours later. Now, if I'm having that meal at 6 or 7 o'clock, it may not be until I wake up in the morning because I'm going to be in bed hopefully before midnight, right? So in the morning when I wake up, I have a bowel movement. In an ideal situation, my system is now empty. 8 to 12 hours after each meal, you have a bowel movement. There's nothing else in there. To be honest with you, Paul, if you're having bowel movements 5 to 7 days after you begin fasting, it means your system's a little backed up. It's a little sluggish. Okay, that shouldn't be happening. Okay, but if someone begins to fast with me and they've had no bowel movements for the first week, and they have no bowel movements for the second week, third week, that's okay. They'll eliminate when they start refeeding. I don't, most people are walking around with 10 to 20 pounds of old material in their system. And I know this because we see people eliminating this all the time. And so, I've had clients, I had a client who was here about 15 months ago, 72-year-old, and he, for 4.5 months after he broke his fast, he had between 7 and 16 bowel movements a day. Now, this is a guy who couldn't gain weight. He came to me so lean that I didn't let him do 21 days. He wanted to. I stopped him after 16 because he had no reserves left. Okay, by the time he left here, several weeks later, he weighed more than when he got here. By eliminating all this old hard waste that was stuck in his body, he was able to gain weight for the first time in 5 or 6 years. He'd been losing weight every day for years, couldn't gain it. We have a lot of people like that. So often what's going on when people gain weight is they're so backed up with old hard waste, they're not absorbing anything. They're not able to assimilate anything.
Considering the unnatural diet most people are growing up on, I know fasting will help the body get rid of the waste. Do you ever
Done properly. Yeah.
do you ever let people help the process by doing some type of herbal cleanse or colon cleanse or something?
No, you can't take anything except water, or you're really taking yourself out of the process to some degree. So not while here. Now, if someone wants to do that before they come, they can. I still don't recommend it because unfortunately, what those things do, and this has been proven by studies, is they tend to imbalance the body. Sometimes imbalance electrolytes, usually dehydrate the body to some extent. I really don't want people. I believe, and I may be wrong, but my belief is that every time we attempt to manipulate the body into creating a particular outcome, like make the body have a bowel movement by taking something that's toxic, which is what these herbal cleanses are, I believe we're creating unintended side effects. So my practice has always been to help people get out of the way, not to try to manipulate it in some way.
What about the idea that we've added stuff to the natural press of the body to make it impacted or whatever it is.
Yeah,
So under normal
true.
circumstances, we can let the body heal itself, but on sometimes we need to help it, whether it's uh, herbs or
Well,
essential oils or hyperbaric chambers or something, because we put ourselves in such a damaged situation. What would you say to that?
yeah, I mean, I certainly understand the idea, the philosophy behind it, but my experience has been that when people fast with my protocol, the way that we do it here, they wind up eliminating everything they need to without needing anything else in almost every case. I mean, again, every once in a while, like the woman last night, this is someone, by the way, who is a little older. These people are much more likely to wind up with stuff that's hard and dry and more intransigent. It's going to be harder to move that stuff. For most people, this is not an issue. Most people do fine, never need an enema, never need to get a colonic ever, and they wind up moving out everything they need to.
After a long fast, what do you feel is the best way to break? It should be broken.
Well, we break fast here. Again, we have staple foods. We have watermelon and papaya and fresh coconuts every single day of the year, always here. So we break fasts on those three things only. Your choice. It's up to you, but it's either a little bit of watermelon, papaya, or fresh coconut water. And again, I have a specific protocol, but those are the only things we offer the first day of the fast. The second day, in the dry season, when we have other melons available, we'll add other melons into the mix as well. But the first day, it's only those three. And then each day we start to add more. We stick with things that are high in water, easy to digest. Most people are dehydrated. Most people have a lot of old hard stuff in there. We need that water coming in, that perfect water from our food to help move this stuff out.
Is there anyone that you wouldn't fast if they were like in a certain condition, or is there any circumstance you would say
You want me to name them by name? Because there's one or two people I wouldn't fast.
not people, situation?
I know what you're asking. Yeah, I know what you're asking. There are a few people I wouldn't take again, that's for sure. We've turned some people down and gotten a lot. I mean, some of the haters out there, people have said, sorry, we won't take you again. Then they've gone and said some nasty things about us. First of all, I wouldn't fast a woman who is pregnant or breastfeeding, okay, because it's too fast, too rapid a detox for the baby. So we wouldn't do that. There are relatively few conditions, though. I mean, again, someone has to be electrolyte balanced before we fast them, because if they're out of balance, that's going to be very, very challenging. But there are not too many conditions. I mean, I know some people think, if you've got serious liver or kidney issues, you can't fast. I don't know a better way to heal the body. Adrenal challenges, I don't know a better way to heal the adrenals than through complete rest. So there aren't too many issues I can think of. Now, we're not equipped to deal with people that are dealing with very serious psychiatric conditions. We're not a mental hospital, so we can't really oversee people that need that kind of oversight. But other than that, I mean, we take people who are dealing with very serious issues, and we take people who are healthy but just want to be healthier. It almost doesn't matter what they've got. I mean, every person completes an application. I review it. I then talk to them, and they actually commit before we do that Zoom call. But if I'm clear, no, this is a problem, then we'll refund their money. It doesn't happen often. I mean, almost everyone's perfectly fit.
If somebody does have a mental issue, in general, not just your place, but in general, can a fast benefit them, or is it quite dangerous?
No, fasting would definitely benefit them. And in fact, what I'll often recommend, I will work with these people, but what I recommend they do instead of coming here, because we really can't care for them, is they stay home where they have people already prepared to help them out, who their family, who knows what their situation is and knows what to do if they have an issue. And I'll work with them remotely. We're just not equipped to deal with them here.
Sure. What if somebody's doing chemotherapy or just recently finished chemo? Can fasting detox them too hard or something?
No, it doesn't detox them too hard. The body's intelligent enough to detox at a good pace. I wouldn't fast someone who is taking chemo. I wouldn't do that. I think that's a mistake. While we're trying to detoxify, we don't want to be putting toxic stuff in. But once they're done, absolutely. What I would, if it were me, I would immediately fast afterward to get the garbage out of my body as quickly as possible.
Okay. And so the last topic is there any role in a specific spirituality or spiritual path that you have at your place there, or is it each person does their own personal thing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, each person does their own personal thing. I'm not particularly interested in religion. I think I grew up in Judaism, but stopped practicing it a long time ago. I believe that we're all connected, that we're all part of the same divine creative energy. For me, my spiritual path is just remembering that. It involves meditation. It doesn't involve too much else. I mean, it involves me trying to do my best to be kind and loving to everyone I encounter. I fail sometimes, but that's my spiritual path.
Yeah. When people say that, kind and loving, I think that's see the whole idea of kind of loving, it's like it's subjective, what's kind and loving. It's like
Of course,
tasting,
absolutely, it is. You're absolutely right.
you know. But
Yeah.
that's wonderful. So I'm going to put all your contact information below so people could check out your website and your social media information. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close out this interview?
Well, I mentioned earlier that for anyone that really is committed to their health, I think it's important to live in a climate that supports health. You can live in Florida, you could live in Southern California, but for anyone that wants to live in a place where you can grow all your own food, live with like-minded people, we're creating an intentional community for people here in Costa Rica. The whole project is called Las Cascadas. It's amazing. There's a website, lascascadas.org, but you might want to check that out. That's it, really. I mean, I guess the last thing I like to tell people is, regardless of where you are now with your health, if you're willing to commit to doing what you need to do to support your body, you can probably create a much higher level of health than you've ever experienced before. We see that all the time.
Well, I know you've done it, but for realistic terms, can a person in the United States uh, translocate to Costa Rica without living in like San Jose, with going somewhere more remote? Uh,
Absolutely.
it's not as difficult as it might seem.
No, it's not difficult at all. And again, I mean, we're trying to make it really easy for people. If they want to be part of a community, you come and you can buy a lot, you can build your own place, we can build it for you. We're not at the building stage yet. We're at the earlier stages of this project, but it's an amazing place. And for anyone interested, I mean, we have the two highest waterfalls in Central America. We've got about 19 more waterfalls in the project. We're creating one of the largest permaculture-based fruit farms in the world. There's amazing things that are going to be happening here.
Are there a lot of Americans down there?
There's a lot of Americans in Costa Rica. Our project is actually very international. We have people from the US, we have people from Canada, we have people from probably 10 or 12 different countries: Belgium, Russia, France, Switzerland, Germany, Croatia, all over the world. It's really amazing, the group that's coming together.
That's wonderful. And I have to ask, what's your absolute favorite food? And not fruit. I mean, what's your favorite fruit? We know fruit's your favorite. What's your favorite fruit in the whole world?
That's a hard question to answer. If I had to pick one favorite, I mean, not something like I'd live on for every day for the rest of my life, but just like my favorite thing when I can get it, that's going to be fresh durian.
Fresh durian. All right. That would be my answer as well.
Amazing.
Even a good frozen durian.
Even good frozen durian is pretty amazing. But the thing is, if someone said to me, okay, you can pick one fruit you're going to have to live on every day for the rest of your life, it would be watermelon.
It would be, really.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I know, of course, in that case, we would always get sick of something eventually, because
I mean, durian, I've gone as many as 6 or 7 days in a row with durian.
oh yeah, but you're talking the rest of your life,
I mean, but even 6 or 7 days, my body says that's enough. That's enough.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
It's heavy. I love it, but it's
I knew you were gonna say the other way around, like you've gone that far. But yeah,
No,
it's
no.
because I got so many mangoes here now. It's mango season, and I'm getting to a point where unless it's a top-notch mango, I'll just walk by it. I'll be like,
It's funny you say that, because I mean, when I came here, I loved durian then, but I was really thinking, okay, but I'm going to be in a place, and there's not very many durians growing here yet. I mean, now we've planted some, but there's not many growing in Costa Rica. So I thought, mangoes. I mean, if I can get mangoes in mango season, why would I eat anything else? I'll live on mangoes for months at a time, right? The first year I was here, I realized after a couple of days of eating mangoes, my body wanted other things. There are two things I've never been tired of: papayas and watermelon. I could eat them every day. Okay. Everything else, my favorite things: after a few days, my body says, take a break. That's enough of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I like getting all the different varieties, because there's so many varieties. So two mangoes don't taste this; they could taste completely opposite. So
Exactly.
switch off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but it's
I'll
wonderful.
I'll
Yeah.
smuggle some cuttings in from your stuff.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's great. But this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining
Pleasure to
us.
see you. Yeah,
And everybody, remember, I'm going to put Lauren's contact information below in the description, and check out his website and his social media. Follow him, and we'd love to have you back on for a Q&A, maybe a live
it'd be a
Q&A.
pleasure.
That
It'd be
was
a pleasure.
wonderful.
Yeah, let me know.
All right, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
for watching. Remember to subscribe if you like this. And until then, everybody, have a great day and great world life.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.